Next, we'll look at early exercise of American options. Well, perhaps a surprising fact is that if you have a non-dividend stock, American and European calls have the same value. In other words, when there's no dividends on the stock, the early exercise option has no value. And this comes from the boundaries that we looked at a moment ago. Namely, the value of an American has to be greater than or equal to the value of a European. But we saw that the value of a European, in fact, was greater than or equal to S minus the present value of K. Present value of K is smaller than K, and so this is in fact greater than or equal to S minus K. In other words, a European option has to have value greater than its exercise value if you could exercise it. That means if you have an American option, you should never choose to exercise it. If you want to liquidate, you would go into the market and sell it for a price, which, as we can see from these inequalities, the price has to be greater than the exercise value. If there are dividends, it may be optimal to exercise early, and we'll see that in just a moment. Put options, again, may be optimal to exercise early, whether they have dividends or not. So if we look at calls and puts, calls on stock without dividends are the exception. Namely, early exercise has no value. If the stock has dividends, early exercise is valuable for puts and calls, and even if there's no dividends, early exercise is valuable for puts. So let's imagine a couple of examples. First of all, an American call with dividends. Imagine that you're at time T, which is expiry minus 2 days. The stock is currently worth $10. You have a strike, you have an American option, strike of 2, and you know that tomorrow, the day before, there's going to be a dividend payment at time T minus 1 of, let's say, $10. So you have an American call. We're looking at an American call on a stock that's currently worth $10, and for reasons that we don't need to go into, tomorrow that stock is going to pay a liquidating dividend of $10. Well, it's apparently valuable to exercise. And the reason is that if I exercise now, I buy a $10 stock for $2. And then that $10 stock is liquidated, and I get tomorrow when the dividend is paid. What if I don't exercise now? If I wait until the dividend is paid, the expected value of the stock at time T minus 1, it has a value of $10 at time T minus 2, but tomorrow it's going to pay a full $10 dividend. It should be 0. And the exercise at time T is worth nothing. That makes sense. We have the option to buy a stock whose value is 0 for $2. It's going to expire worthless. So here's a simple example, and you can see that this is the nature of all examples that relate to American options on stock with dividends. Namely, the reason early exercise can be valuable is that the payment of dividends reduces the stock price, and therefore deferring exercise can give you an exercise value less than if you exercise earlier and then capture the dividends yourself. Let's do an example with a put. Again, it's an extreme example, but it helps make the point. We can use a new slide. So let's say, again, that I have a stock whose value is $1. So we have a company that's getting into trouble, its stock price is dropping. I have an American put, and the strike price, I was very lucky when I did it. I bought an American put with a strike of 101. So I have the right to sell the stock for $101. I have 1 year left on the option. So how do I think about this? Well, if I exercise now, I have a profit of 100. So right now I can put $100 in my pocket. How do I do that? I buy the stock for 101, I sell the stock for 1, I put $100 in my pocket. What if I exercise in a year? Well, my profit can't possibly be bigger than 101. Right? I have the option to sell this stock for $101. Stock price can't be negative. The best that can happen is that the stock price goes to 0. So in 1 year, my profit can't possibly be greater than $101, or I can have $100 now. Well, which one's better? Well, it's going to depend on interest rates. So for example, if interest rates were 1.5% today, I would be better off exercising now and investing the $100 at 1.5%. In a year, I'd have $101.50, if that's an annual rate, and that would exceed the greatest profit I could have by waiting. So again, you can see situations in which even without dividends, ignoring dividends, it's optimal to exercise early simply because the value of the profit invested is greater than the additional profit you can make by waiting.